The city of San Fernando has been a center for arts, culture, and history for many years. This main city in the south of Trinidad has a population of just over 50,000 persons, with a church, mandir or mosque on virtually every corner. One such church is the Susamachar Presbyterian Church, established in 1871 by Canadian missionary, the Reverend Kenneth J. Grant.
It was here at Susamachar Presbyterian Church in 1932 where the story of the Wilson Memorial Pipe Organ began.
In 1932, the Scottish Presbyterian Church on High Street merged with the Susamachar congregation.
Church of Scotland is another dimension of the entire Presbyterian family in the world. The Church of Scotland on High Street catered for the expatriate businessmen and others who came from Scotland and perhaps Europe as a whole. However, with dwindling membership and the difficulties in acquiring a minister from Scotland, it was decided to merge with the Susamachar Church. So in 1932, there was a fund that was created by the Scots Presbyterians. I believe it was about £500. And that fund still exists today, in a different amount, of course.
This new English-made pipe organ was meant to replace the parlor organ, which was there before.
It is interesting to know that the organ was dedicated to the Reverend Wilson, who was the last serving minister on the High Street Presbyterian Church.
A bronze plate on the organ bears the following inscription: erected in memory of Reverend J.S. Wilson, M.A., minister of the High Street Presbyterian Church, by legacy of Mr. W.S. Robertson and gifts of friends in Trinidad.
This here is the very same organ. It is a two-manual, that is to say, two-keyboard instrument with an estimated 500 pipes. A small organ when you compare it to organs on an international scale, but indeed an organ that is rich both in history and sentiment, and an organ which has arguably become a centerpiece of Presbyterianism in Trinidad and Tobago.
Haunting sounds have filled the walls of this church for 90 years this year, 2023, having been dedicated at a service on May 3rd, 1933.
The church would have been a focal point during much of this time, and the organ would certainly have provided, as it still does today, a sense of comfort and assistance to those who worshipped at Susamachar.
Susamachar, as a an urban church, as all other churches within the boundaries of San Fernando, would have played a very significant part in the development of San Fernando. It's mentioned in the Trinidad Presbyterian from 1914 to 1918. That was the time of World War I. And men from Susamachar, perhaps the English-speaking denomination, they offered themselves to go and serve. Similarly with World War II. World War II was very significant for us. We were still a colony of Britain. So as with all colonies of the British Empire, we as a nation, we were expected to contribute to the war effort. And there were several young men from the Susamachar Presbyterian Church, mainly coming out of the 5th Naprima Scouts, who offered to serve. One of them was my uncle, Flight Lieutenant Gilbert Huber, and he became a squadron leader with the Royal Air Force. Others served in the different branches in different capacities.
Other crucial points would include independence in 1962, the Black Power movement in the 1970s, the 1990 coup, and of course, most recently, the COVID-19 pandemic. The church has been a guiding light in all of these.
And of course, the organ has been a pivotal aspect of worship here at Susamachar, whether it be accompanying the congregation with their hymns, accompanying the choir with their anthems, or providing prelude and postlude music as necessary.
The organ was built by Heel and Sons Company Limited of Plymouth, England. George Heel founded Heel and Sons Company Limited in 1860. His grandson, Captain George Melville Heel, was responsible for the construction, installation, and tuning of the organ.
What is remarkably fascinating is the fact that the wood that was chosen to build the housing of the organ is actually Burma teak. This ties in beautifully to the story of Susamachar and the wider Presbyterian Church as a whole.
The history of the Presbyterian Church of Trinidad and Tobago is a history that begins with an inadvertent adventure. John Morton was a minister in Nova Scotia. He had been diagnosed with some health complications relating to bronchitis and diphtheria, and it was suggested that Caribbean air would be good for him. It was recommended that he go to Barbados. However, some factors, such as the price of oak staves, caused the trip to be diverted, and his ship was sent to Trinidad. In Trinidad, John Morton disembarked, walked around, observed, and was transformed. He saw the East Indian indentured laborers who had been brought from India. Slavery had been abolished, and the East Indian community in Trinidad and Tobago was being replenished by people who were continually brought from India to work on the sugar plantations. This community was growing, and for John Morton, there was a problem. He said that if there was no effort to evangelize and to educate and to enlighten the East Indian community, it would be a stain on our Christianity. Therefore, John Morton began a mission to the East Indians. After trying to convince his church to send someone, they basically said, if you want a mission to start, you go. So he did. And that's how the Presbyterian Church of Trinidad and Tobago began in 1868. The influences on the church at that time were from Nova Scotia and, by extension, from Scotland. However, to communicate with the people who had been brought from India, John Morton and the other missionaries learned the Indian languages and communicated with them and worshipped in bhajans and with pictures. They used something called magic pictures, which was sort of an early form of a projection. And they showed pictures of scenes from the Bible. And the music was made from Indian instruments, and the songs were songs that were brought from India or translated from Hindi. Later on, however, Western influences prevailed as people learned English. And soon, every church wanted Western music, English songs, and of course, the great, and for many people, the epitome of all church instruments, the pipe organ.
Let us go back in time to the 1930s. At this time, the Reverend J.C. MacDonald was the minister of the Susamachar Presbyterian Church. Using the organ funds, the company, Heel and Sons Company Limited, was contacted and the organ purchased. The boxes containing the pipes and other components were addressed to Reverend J.C. MacDonald, San Fernando, Trinidad, British West Indies. Most of the original components are still here, though over the years, a few additions and a couple minor alterations were made.
Such would include in the 1980s, when the chimes were added, and when Walker and Sons, who had temporarily taken over Heel and Sons Company Limited, did a major rehaul of the bellows and the pipes.
Until recently, little was known about the dedication of the organ on May 3rd, 1933, except what was written in the Trinidad Presbyterian. Mrs. L. Fitzpatrick and Mr. T. W. Gill played by turn. An anthem was rendered by the choir, Mrs. L. de Nobrega and K. J. Grant and E. Grant taking solo parts. However, through extensive research by Timothy Bally, more details have been uncovered, including a picture of the program from the dedication service of this organ. The first person to play the organ was Mrs. L. Fitzpatrick, followed by Mr. T. W. Gill, who played a voluntary, and the pieces sung by the choir and soloists included "And He Called the Multitude," sung by L. de Nobrega, "I Came Forth from the Father" by E. Grant, "Great and Mighty Art Thou" by the choir, and "Follow Me" by E. Grant and K. J. Grant.
The pipe organ is a fascinating instrument. Think for a moment of an electronic keyboard that has a whole bank of sounds and things. That's exactly what the pipe organ is. These knobs on the side here are called stops. The knobs on the left side control the swell, while the knobs on the right side control the grate. If I pull this stop and play it, it sounds like a violin. And if I pull this stop and play it, it sounds like a flute. Now imagine the year 1361, when the first permanent pipe organ was documented in Germany. There was no electricity, no concept of digital sampling, but this grand instrument was playing various sounds of various instruments through mechanical action. How remarkable! And certainly this gives merit to Guillaume de Machaut, the French medieval composer, who is attributed as saying that the pipe organ is the king of instruments.
Not only do organists use their hands, but they also are required to use their feet to play the pedalboard, which activates 16-foot pipes called bourdons, which rumble and give the rich bass sounds of this instrument. In many cases, playing the pipe organ requires years of training and tutoring, and one never stops learning and developing his skill on the instrument. It is this desire to keep learning, to keep improving, that allows the player to get that much closer to a divine experience. As the only pipe organ in the Presbyterian Church of Trinidad and Tobago, we must continue to cherish and appreciate our iconic instrument and continue to respect and preserve it. In the words written in the May 1933 Trinidad Presbyterian, may it mean much in the promoting of God's glory and the edification of the people.